Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar, Vice Chairman, Senate Committee on Communicable Diseases, Honorable Ministers, members of the PTF on COVID-19, our viewers from homes and offices, gentlemen of the press, a very good afternoon to you, and I welcome you to the briefing for Tuesday, 19th May 2020. This afternoon we will be taking the remarks, then we take the updates from the Minister of Health, the DG and CDC, the National Coordinator in one group. We'll also receive updates from ministers, including the Minister of Information and Culture. If we have any addition, we will let you know as we progress. May I now invite the chairman of the PTF COVID-19 to please make his remarks. SGF, sir.
Distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar, Vice Chairman of the Senate Committee on Communicable Diseases, members of the Presidential Task Force, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press, once more, our sincere apologies. Today we had an engagement with the National Assembly, and all geared towards our national response. However, I welcome you to the national briefing by the Presidential Task Force, the PTF on COVID-19, for Tuesday, 19th May 2020. Yesterday, the Presidential Task Force comprehensively conveyed Mr. President's directive on extending the eased lockdown for another 2 weeks in the bid to further contain and control the spread of the disease. This well-considered decision was taken out of an abundance of caution, current experiences from different countries, and expert advice. I must add also that we were persuaded by the history of global pandemics because it is replete with evidence of exponential rise in pandemic upon early lifting of restrictions, for which the 1918 to 1920 influenza remains the most recent example in human history. Nigeria, judging from this historical perspective, must in our present approach delicately balance between safety and economic consideration before we reopen the economy fully. Again, I wish to repeat that the decision is not punitive. We share your pains and also share your concerns. However, as I said yesterday, our future remains in our hands, and compliance is one of the keys to opening that future. As we go into the first week of the extension of Phase 1 under the eased lockdown regime, we appeal once more to everyone to diligently comply with measures put in place. Of particular importance is the need to obey the curfew, obey the ban on interstate travels, observe physical distancing, continue to avoid large gatherings, and obey personal and respiratory hygiene, and align with the policy on use of face masks or coverings. I must also emphasize that the 2 additional weeks should be utilized by businesses, offices, professional bodies, places of worship, educational institutions awaiting reopening to plan and adopt new strategies under a COVID-19 era in line with the guidelines issued. Above all, behavioral change is a must for every citizen because COVID-19 has changed the world completely. The PTF COVID-19 is committed and determined to continue to provide the required leadership for this national response. In the coming days, intense consultations will be deepened with different segments of the society, including the state governments, security agencies, religious and community leaders to ensure a coordinated implementation of the measures. As I mentioned yesterday, specific directives have been issued to security agencies to strictly enforce the measures. I therefore admonish Nigerians to please observe the restriction in full. I, however, wish to assure our essential workers, such as the frontline medical personnel, the media, the environmental health workers, farmers and agro-related service providers, oil and gas services, aviation, the power sector, and a host of others, that they will be adequately protected. Your obligation is to always carry a valid means of identification. As part of our engagement strategy, the Presidential Task Force, a sub of our committee, met with the joint health committees of the National Assembly this afternoon, today, to seek further collaboration and support for the battle. We robustly presented the health sector response to the pandemic. As expected, the interactive session was very useful, and the Presidential Task Force COVID-19 received a reassurance of the support from the legislature. And that is evidenced by the presence of distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar, who is one of the vice chairmen of the health committees in the Senate, who is present with us today at this press conference. I think this is his second attendance. We welcome you, sir, and we thank you for the measure of support that has been extended to this task force. I am happy to inform you that our risk communication strategy has been enhanced by the Public Relations Consultants Association of Nigeria, PRACAN. The professional body has offered the services of its members pro bono to the Presidential Task Force in order to strategically and effectively communicate with more Nigerians on the pandemic. The Presidential Task Force appreciates this offer and look forward to consolidating the relationship. Consistent with our community engagement strategy, we will leverage on existing community structures and assets right down to the ward level to push through a massive public awareness campaign aimed at ensuring voluntary community engagement and ownership of the fight. Let me remind all Nigerians that the ravaging force of the virus does not discriminate on the basis of status, creed, political persuasion, profession, or where you come from. Now is the time to avoid any distraction from whatever quarters, and all hands must be and remain on deck. On our part, we assure Nigerians of our commitment to accountability, diligence, and probity. Finally, I wish to also remind all Nigerians to remain their brothers' keepers at this moment. Your response so far has been tremendous, and I urge that we do more in helping out where necessary. We should do more for the elderly, particularly the sick, persons living with disabilities, pregnant women, the vulnerable, and the poor that we find amidst us, who must avoid stigmatization and must consider the mental health of those affected and offer them necessary support. For those who are struggling with the disease, help is available. Do not go underground. It is important to talk about it and to seek help. Every effort spares humanity the agony of the spread of the virus. I now call on the Honorable Minister of Health and the DG Nigerian Center for Disease Control, and subsequently the National Coordinator and other ministers to give you the current update. I thank you for your patience and for the listening. Thank you.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, distinguished Senator, honorable ministers, and of the PTF. Yesterday, His Excellency the President authorized the extension of the easing of restrictions in Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT by another 2 weeks. The lockdown in Kano was also extended by 2 weeks to address remaining challenges to containing the increasing number of confirmed COVID-19 cases. It is of great importance that we, members of the health sector and citizens, endeavor to use this period to dedicate our efforts to strive for the best outcomes, but also be prepared and prepare for the worst. As we learn more about coronavirus every day, we must be ready to adjust our strategy based on knowledge and evidence. As at yesterday, the 18th of May, 2020, a total of 216 new COVID-19 cases had been recorded in Nigeria. The breakdown being as follows: Lagos 74, Katsina 33, Oyo 19, Kano 17, Edo 13, Zamfara 10, Ogun 8, Gombe 8, Borno 8, Bauchi 7, Kwara 7, FCT 4, Kaduna 3, Enugu 3, and Rivers 2, giving an aggregate number of 6,175 in 34 states and the Federal Capital Territory. 1,644 patients have been treated and discharged from care, but we have sadly recorded 191 deaths in 26 states of the Federal Capital Territory. Even though this latter figure seems low compared to other countries, a disturbing picture emerging from the statistics is that not only are most fatalities observed to be linked with pre-existing diseases, many of them are educated, well-to-do people who chose home-based care, where complications suddenly developed and they had to be rushed to hospital. Experience is beginning to show that breathing complications in COVID-19 patients can arise with little or no notice. This is an added reason while all persons should seek medical attention when they test positive. To continue strengthening response in states, the Federal Ministry of Health and the Nigeria Center for Disease Control are assessing isolation centers all over the country, recently in Yenagoa and Oshogbo. We also continue providing diagnostic commodities and facilities in collaboration with partners. A ministerial task team led by a director of the Federal Ministry of Health arrived Calabar yesterday, Monday the 18th, to interact with Cross River State Ministry of Health. They were well received and have had useful meetings with state government officials, medical directors of federal health institutions in the state, and also met traditional rulers. The team is made up of experts of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the Department of Hospital Services, Department of Public Health, and Department of Family Health, each one with terms of reference to work with relevant state officials to review and evaluate present status and needs of Cross River State. They will have audience to debrief His Excellency the Cross River State Governor before they depart from Calabar. The ministerial task team to Kano has reported improvements in processes and indices of Kano, and also of strategies to control increasing cases of COVID-19 infection in the entire region by ramping up testing, isolation, and case management capabilities. The team also paid a fact-finding visit to Borno State yesterday and made recommendations on supporting the strategy there. Viral infectious disease experts from the Federal Teaching Hospital Irua are supporting the state's initiatives with hands-on training and confidence building of healthcare workers. The Federal Ministry of Health places special priority on the maintenance and continuation of essential services in health in both private and public hospitals throughout the country because of the serious harm that arising from neglecting routine healthcare services like reproductive, maternal, neonatal child health, and nutrition, immunization, and chronic disease management due to fear of COVID-19 or due to sole focus on COVID-19. Therefore, the missions to states always include officials of National Primary Healthcare Development Agency and Department of Family Health, whose assignments are to press for restoration of normal medical services. We started the session of the World Health Assembly that is normally held in Geneva every year. But yesterday, for the first time ever by teleconference, where, as head of the Nigerian delegation, I delivered a statement on behalf of the government of Nigeria, focusing on our actions and interventions in curbing the spread of COVID-19. It gives opportunity for countries to show solidarity, to share experience, to promote international cooperation in fighting this new virus. Another important outcome of the Assembly is emphasis on the need for cooperation among citizens and also with their state authorities in this fight, a war to concern citizens no less than the state, and requiring that we support and comply with adversaries that are for our survival. No policing should be needed to do the right thing. In this regard, I urge abiding by the mandatory and correct use of masks by all of us, each for the protection of the other. Masks must be worn and washed daily and ironed where possible. Masks should cover the mouth and the nose and should not be left under the chin, especially during close quarter conversation, lest its purpose is defeated. New understanding is that droplet dispersal takes place even during normal speech, and the common use of masks can significantly limit the risk of transmission, especially where people live in closed settings. Tissues must be used when coughing and sneezing, and then disposed of. The stay-at-home advisory needs to be more strictly adhered to, and citizens did not undercut the ban on interstate travel by hiding in goods trucks. Finally, I wish to commend, as usual, our frontline health workers who take responsibility for keeping us safe. Thank you for your attention.
Chair of the Presidential Task Force and Secretary of the Federal Government of Nigeria, Honorable Ministers, distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Again, thank you very much for coming for our regular press briefing. Over the past few weeks, we have talked about a lot of the added measures, what we call the non-pharmaceutical interventions like wearing masks, social distancing, that we hope to need to do for some time, but we all look to a period where we can go back to speaking to people without wearing masks. But we've also spoken about some things that we hope will stay, like hand washing frequently. And for the health sector, one of the biggest areas that we hope will change forever is our attitude towards infection prevention and control and the appropriate use of personal protective equipment. A few years ago, when we just started work at NCDC, precisely 3 years ago, there was a big outbreak of Lassa fever in the Federal Medical Center, Abakaliki, which is now the Alex Ekweme University Teaching Hospital. We lost many healthcare workers in that incident. I remember going down to Abakaliki, the patients were refusing to bury the dead. It was that bad. We collectively worked with the healthcare workers in that hospital. The next year, after a series of trainings that lasted over a full year, constant engagement with the management, the leadership of the state. You know, FETA is one of the most transformed federal teaching hospitals in the country. After Erua, together with Owo, they have become the leaders of our response to infectious diseases. We probably haven't heard a lot about them because they manage a disease called Lassa fever that affects mostly the poor in our society. And the place of PPEs has suddenly become elevated because of the level of society that feels at risk for this new infectious disease. But the rational use of PPEs is really something that needs to become a sustained change in our sector. In most procurement plans of our federal institutions, state institutions, even in private sector hospitals, you would rarely find a procurement of PPEs in any of them. This has to change. During this outbreak, yes, the federal government, state governments, the private sector, our donor agencies, the UN, everybody is procuring PPEs. We're distributing PPEs across the country. We have a whole big logistics plan over the next 4 months of PPE procurement and distribution. But we all know that this is not sustainable. We all know it is not sustainable. We have to go back and normalize the procurement of PPEs into the routine procurement plans of our institutions, so that we plan for this and we use them routinely. But this will not happen if Nigerians don't demand that it happens. And we've said this over and over again, but maybe now it will stick, that a patient going to a hospital and seeing a doctor has a right to demand that that doctor is wearing gloves when they're manipulating them. It's not a nice to have. It's something that needs to happen. If you see your nurse going from one patient to the other without washing hands in between, you should ask as a patient, aren't you supposed to wash your hands if you've just touched a patient before you come to me? So there are lots of changes that is now happening in the health sector because of a new threat of this new virus, that are things that we have to normalize in our clinical practice. That normalization has to happen in the medical establishment, but it also has to happen among the populace. The increased emphasis on IPC starts with the high index of suspicion. You see, when you've actually diagnosed the patient with COVID, it's very unlikely that that patient will transmit to you, because you know. Most of the transmissions to healthcare workers and hospital infections have happened before the diagnosis is made. Before the diagnosis is made. Because normally, once you know it's a COVID patient, people start dressing from top to bottom in Tyvek suits. The riskiest period is that patient that comes in and you don't know. And that is where the appropriate use of PPEs is essential in managing risk. Over the last few years, we've worked with the Infection Control Association of Nigeria, ICAN, and the Robert Koch Institute to build a new department, a new unit in the department on IPC. This team is really at the heart of the people that have been going around the country training. When you hear 11,000 people have been trained, it's because of a little seed that was planted 3 years ago, when we started focusing on infection prevention and control, basically driven by the risk of Lassa fever in Nigeria. So, given that we didn't learn sufficiently from Lassa, now is a time for us to learn collectively from COVID. To date, we have trained close to 12,000 healthcare workers, and this is an ongoing process. The training is happening in our health facilities, our military services, everyone that is related to managing of patients. We've developed guidelines. The most important one is a new one called the Rational Use of PPEs, because what we have seen happen is from the non-use, in some institutions, we have now gone to an extreme use. So, in contexts where we've never used PPE, suddenly every single person in a hospital wants to wear a complete Tyvek suit with gloves, with gowns, with face masks. This in itself is not appropriate. So we have produced guidelines to advise what the pharmacist needs to wear, what the lab technician needs to wear. And not just the lab technician by definition, but what role are you playing at that time in the lab that needs the use of personal protective equipment. So this will take time to get used to. And as we get used to this new way of practicing medicine, practicing nursing, practicing laboratory science, practicing pharmacy, we'll get used to these protocols, adapt them in our hospitals, and use them on a day-to-day basis. The inefficient use of PPEs is just as risky as the non-use of PPEs. So over the next few months, we hope that this is one change that will stay with us as we move into the future. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'd like to first of all start by talking about phase 2 of the eased lockdown. As you are all aware, we have extended the conditions we placed in phase 1. We are now going into a 2-week extension of the gradual easing of the lockdown. The purpose of the extension is to provide the public with a window of opportunity to start adjusting, to start preparing for the new life with COVID infection. We are in for the long haul. This pandemic is not going to end in the next few days or few weeks. It's going to be with us for a little longer. Therefore, the earlier we start putting in place measures to adjust our lives and our behaviors, the faster we'll be able to get back to normal. We also extended the conditions for the gradual easing to prepare and make sure that we continue to slow down the pandemic so that we do not have a rebound. Now is the time to intensify efforts in terms of the safety advisories we have provided, in particular wearing masks and staying at home as much as possible. There is no doubt that community transmission is intensifying, and the speed at which we implement the safety advisories we have provided will also determine how fast we can come out of this pandemic. In terms of the guidelines on the lockdown, the existing easing of the lockdown remains largely the same for the 2-week extension. In particular, interstate travels, except for essential travels and transport of essential services, remain restricted. The ban on passenger flights will remain in place. Religious places, schools, clubs, bars, parks, sporting and gaming centers remain closed. We must continue to maintain a physical distance of 2 meters at all times. Mass gatherings of more than 20 people outside the workplace remains restricted. Government offices may remain open on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays between 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. to government staff of grade levels 14 to 17. We also expect offices in general to limit their staff numbers for those that are within the offices to not more than 30 to 50% of the total workforce. In terms of other measures, the main changes are with enforcement. We will continue to work very closely with the security services, and in particular, we will continue to encourage local authorities to make use of mobile courts for immediate prosecution of offenders. Offices, shopping complexes, and banks must start providing temperature checks and hand sanitizers at the entrances. Banks, offices, and shops must also create convenient sitting arrangements, including the use of markings on floors to allow for physical distancing, both outside as well as inside the premises. Banks are asked to limit the number of customers to allow for physical distancing and to also improve access to ATM machines. Supermarkets, neighborhood markets, and restaurants may still open between the hours of 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But as with before, restaurants are only allowed to provide takeaway services. There should be no eat-in, and they must maintain restrictions on mass gatherings and physical distancing. Moving on to the issues of alignment with the state governments, as directed by Mr. President, we will continue to engage very closely with state governments to ensure that there is harmony when it comes to the implementation of safety advisories. State governments are still allowed to take decisions with regards to their own local setup. We will, in particular, try to continue to promote ownership of this response at a state level. We will be pushing through increased public awareness campaigns and also looking at specific areas that have high prevalences, what we call hotspots, and working with state governments to address the epidemic in a more coordinated and geographic manner. In terms of the coming week, as you're all aware, Ramadan is fast receding, and the Eid celebration will be upon us very soon. This is an important milestone, and we urge all our Muslims and brothers and sisters to please continue to observe this period when it does come in a safe manner and not to expose themselves to the virus. If we do expose ourselves to the virus, we are exposing ourselves and putting the lives of our loved ones, particularly those that are vulnerable or the elderly persons in the society, to an increased risk of mortality. Finally, we must remember that we are still in a pandemic. We are in a pandemic where a community transmission is becoming quite entrenched. We need to be aware that as we move on to further relaxations, this does not mean that the risk has gone away. Self-awareness, particularly of the risks, taking ownership and personal responsibility is particularly important at this period. The number of new infections continues to be high, as recorded yesterday, and we must ensure that we continue to abide by the safety advisories that we have given so that we can interrupt the transmission of the virus and we can get ourselves back to normal lives again. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Information.
The Chairman of PTF COVID-19, members of the committee, gentlemen of the press, good afternoon. This morning, I performed the virtual inauguration of the Committee on Post-COVID Initiatives for the Creative Industry. If you recollect, I announced the establishment of the committee 2 weeks ago when I met with members of the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria, BON. The committee inaugurated today comprises 32 members drawn from the various sectors of the creative industry. The number of members increased from the 14 that was initially announced to 22 as we brought in more sectoral representatives. The committee is to, 1, assess the expected impact of the pandemic on the industry in general. 2, advise the government on how to mitigate job and revenue losses in the sector, as well as to create succor for the industry, small businesses. 3, suggest the type of taxation and financing that is best for the industry at this time to encourage growth, and advise the government on any other measure or measures that can be undertaken to support the industry. The establishment of the committee was necessitated by the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the creative industry, which is very key to the nation's economy and also a major plank of the economic diversification policy of this administration. Yes, every industry is affected by the pandemic, but the creative industry in particular, being audience-centered, has been the hardest hit. Though I had given the committee 4 weeks to submit its report, It requested for an additional week during today's inauguration, and I granted the extension. I look forward to the committee's recommendation, which I believe will help the industry to rebound post-COVID-19. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the phase on updates. We shall now take the questions from our colleagues from the press.
A state allowing up to 500 people to congregate together. So I want to know if there's a national agreement on that. And my next question actually goes to the national coordinator. Yes, there is an extension of the first phase of the easing of the lockdown like you have announced to us. But I want to know, is there a consideration for small and medium business owners and even artisans in this new phase? I ask this because since the lockdown, a lot of these people have been at home and no money is coming in and there's hunger. They've actually written to some of us as journalists to really appeal to you and the PTF to consider them as we continue this easing of the lockdown. And finally, the last question is for the DG of the NCDC. Well, this is a question I had posed to you before, and it has to do with profiling of those who've unfortunately lost to the coronavirus. I ask this because the last time you told us, at that time I think we had about 40 fatalities. Now we're pushing close to 200. Nigerians want to know the profile of those who've died. We don't need to know their names, but we want to know how many of them died from underlying illnesses and how many of them died from purely coronavirus complications. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the PTF, my colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Nancy Oyedia Orum from AIT. The Minister of Education, I got this message from a woman. She said, my son is an undergraduate at the University of Ilorin. He started his 6-month CWAS program in March, then the COVID-19 lockdown. My son got in touch with his school's coordinator, who insisted that he must go to work if his company requires him to be there, or risk repeating the program. He's saying, please help find out from the Minister of Education or whoever is in charge of CWAS in Nigeria. If all other students are staying safe at home, why should their mates be exposed to danger in the name of work experience? All right, my next question goes to the Minister of Environment. Sir, some time ago, you told us that there will be decontamination of about 125 aircraft and airports across the country, and that you have mapped out a number of places that are high-risk areas. I want you to give us update on what you have done so far. The SGF, sir, there was a question one of my colleagues posed to you, I think last week, on the high cost of data, especially for students who are at home, streaming classes online. And you promised to speak to the Minister of Communication, so we want to get update on that too. Thank you.
Good afternoon all. Rachel Abuja from the News Agency of Nigeria. My first question is for Senator Sadiq. Welcome, sir. Sir, page 10 of the United Nations document on COVID-19 stated that all countries need to take action for mental health. Likewise, WHO said that in every one in 4 persons will suffer mental health case in their lifetime. And this is going to put 50 million Nigerians at risk, coupled with the fact that we're fighting COVID-19 now. And my senator is aware that Nigeria, we don't even have a mental health bill yet. We're still taking refuge from the 1958 bill. So I would like to know what the Health Committee, Senate Health Committee, will be doing to ensure that Nigerians have access to mental health at this point in time, especially those affected by the COVID-19 and their families. We can't have health without mental health, Senator. Thank you. And my next question is for the DG NCDC. Sir, I would like to know if states independently test and confirmed cases. This question is informed by the allegations made by some Nigerians saying that some governors actually work with their laboratories of their state to influence this positive number. So I would like to know if there are gains for states with higher positive numbers, and if there are gains for states who are yet to confirm any case. Many thanks.
Good afternoon, the SGF, members of the committee, my colleagues. My name is Nancy Anika from Region Nigeria. My first question is to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Sir, the Air France evacuation flight to Cotonou leaves tomorrow. So Nigerians who are on the flight are asking what are the plans for them to be able to come from Cotonou to Nigeria. The next is to the national coordinator. Frontline health workers under the FCTA would need your intervention. They said they have not been paid their salaries. And then to the national coordinator, on Friday you said 5 states in the country are currently participating in the ongoing WHO's solidarity trial. Please, we would like to have the list of these 5 states. Thank you.
Good evening, sirs. Good evening, my colleagues. My name is Femi Akonde. I'm a reporter with TVC News. Minister of Health and maybe the DG NCDC. So I would like to know if you begin to develop a strategy for a possible resurgence or a spike in the demand for hydroxychloroquine, because we know it was earlier reported that in places like Lagos, people started having chloroquine poisoning because of the indiscriminate intake of this to prevent contracting the coronavirus. And just yesterday, following the comments from the United States President, we are hearing reports that the demand has increased again. So what are you doing to counter all of this? And sir, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, sir, we are hearing that the Nigerians studying in Malaysia, we know there's a large number of Nigerians there, about more than 13,000 of them have been threatened, or they are being threatened with deportation if the government does not evacuate them as soon as possible. What are you doing to intervene in that situation? Thank you, sirs.
Good evening, members of the PTF. My name is Juliana Taiwo Baloyan. I write for the Sun newspapers. This is for you, the coordinator, please. Despite the assurances from the PTF of having one national response of this pandemic, reports from states is saying otherwise. The latest victim of this is the Poultry Association of Nigeria, one of those rendering essential service. According to them, last week, Thursday, drivers conveying a day-old chicks to poultry farms in the north from Ibadan were asked to stop at Jeba in Niger State by security agents. And when they asked why, they said the governor had ordered that the bridge be closed. This led to over 15,000 birds on transit. This led to the death of over 15,000 birds on transit and the loss of over 5 million naira. The question is, one, how do they recover this loss? And secondly, is there a special process they need to follow in order to avoid the repeat of this disaster in future? Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Friday Kerigbe. I'm a reporter with Channels TV. I'd like to direct my first question to the Minister of Health. Last week, you told us about health workers who recovered from the disease, that they were waiting for reconfirmation before they go back to their workplace. I'd like to have an update on that. How many of them have returned to their duty post since that time? Now, my second question, I would like to seek a clarification from the chairman. It has to do with what you told us last week, that the federal government will be taking its delivery of the Madagascar cure. I'd like to know if we have taken the delivery and if any cost was involved. Because I'm sure you must have read it in some platform that the federal government paid certain amount of money to ferry in those cures. So I'd like to seek that clarification from you. And lastly, I would like the Minister of Interior to respond to this. It has to do with the Chinese medical team. Stories are also going around that they have left the country. I'd like him to tell us, how many weeks or months visa did they actually get when they came into the country? Have they, at the time elapsed, have they left the country or they are still in the country? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I stand on the already established protocols. My name is Kenneth Nanim. I report for Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. Mine is more of an appeal. There have been complaints from my colleagues, that they are not being allowed, they are not given a passage by security agencies, on the road. They are still having difficulties, to get access to their destination, So this is their experience every day. So I am appealing on behalf of my colleagues and other people who are on essential duty that the PTF will also, engage with the security agencies to ensure that those of us who are on essential duty, are allowed passage, on the road. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ernest A.K. I'm from Voice of Nigeria. My questions go to the DG and CDC. So Nigerians would like to know how exactly is the community testing done? They asked, is it that members of the NCDC stay in a particular area in a community and ask residents to come for testing? They would like you to throw more light on that. And the second is, since we are asked to wash our hands constantly with soap or use hand sanitizers and also disinfect surfaces, what about our foods and fruits, for example, that we get in the market? For example, the mango that one will come and touch and not buy, the other will come and touch it, so maybe something like that, it gets infected. Now, with this, how would this be done? We see that they would, definitely we're not going to wash them with soap, so they usually use maybe water and salt. Do you think this is sufficient to, disinfect this, the fruits and food? And the third question, this is a follow-up on the number of tests that we do. Someone would like to know, and I'll read it verbatim. If we can get daily numbers of confirmed cases, don't you think we can also get numbers of tests done daily instead of getting it weekly, like you rightly said last week? Thank you.
Thank you. We have taken in all the questions and we'll be receiving responses from the Honorable Minister of Health, the DG NCDC, the National Coordinator, the Honorable Minister of State Education, Honorable Minister Environment, Honorable Minister Foreign Affairs, Honorable Minister Interior. Then we shall take response from the distinguished senator before the SGF wraps it up. So we begin with the Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. I want to start by using the opportunity to give an advisory on sanitizers. You see a lot of sanitizers out in the market, and a study carried out by a research institution, the Ministry of Health, has shown that not all of them are up to standard. So in buying sanitizers, there is an advisory that must be shared, and you must look, first of all, for the NAFDAC number. You should have a NAFDAC number. Secondly, you should have a place where the ingredients are displayed, the ingredients. And among these ingredients, you must see that it contains minimum of 60% alcohol, 60. So if it is anything different from that, that sanitizer is not going to do the job you think it's doing. So look for the label. The ingredients will be displayed. If there are no ingredients displayed, it's not for you. And in the ingredients, you will see minimum of 60. Usually it can be up to 70. 70% is good. So that is the advisory. As for the question of recovering health workers, generally those who have recovered after their treatment are monitored for 14 more days, 14 days, during which they will generally be recovering from the strain of hospitalization. And many of them go to work. But I think since many are privately engaged, how they actually go to work is not monitored as such, but they're all advised to report if they have any problem. Now, the other question, although it's actually directed at the Center for Disease Control, I'm not sure if the data is with him, about the fatalities from different sources. The breakdown, the aggregate, is actually from Department of Hospital Services, and I can get you the figures, if you like, from Ministry of Health, containing the age group and the circumstances in some cases, so that you can have a clearer picture. It's quite a bit of data. I can get that to you at the next visit. And I think the other question was about hydroxychloroquine. First, we do not at any time and in any way support self-medication. And if anybody, you hear that any person is taking medication of any type, it is obviously something prescribed by his doctor. There are medicines that normally should not be in your hand unless it was prescribed by a doctor. There are medicines called OTC, over the counter. You can buy yourself. It can be Panadol, aspirin, any kind of rub, anything for cough. OTC medicines you can buy over the counter. There is also prescription medicine, which you should not have unless the doctor has prescribed it. But here where people can buy almost what they want, it is not recommended. I do not recommend that you take anything except your doctor has prescribed it to you. As I said before, there is a study being done on the efficacy of some drugs by about 5 centers in our country. Hydroxychloroquine is one of them. When the result comes out, I will share with you. But again, stay with what your doctor has prescribed. Do not start self-medicating. Do not become a doctor for yourself. Otherwise, you can do serious harm to your own self. It was reported that some people did harm to themselves when they started taking chloroquine in Lagos on the information that chloroquine was going to help. So I think that is all that concerns the health sector. Thank you.
So thank you. Amaka, I think that the Honorable Minister has answered the question on that. We'll continue doing that analysis, and as our numbers grow, present that. We do have the data, and we analyze that regularly. And we will share when in due course. I think, Rachel, you asked about whether states are independently confirming cases and whether there's any benefit in increased confirmations or decreased confirmation. None of them. Whether you report more or less, there's no direct relationship between the number of cases and how much support you get. So I don't see the benefit of either reporting more or reporting less. So in our situation report today, we've made public, following your request, the number of tests that every state in Nigeria has carried out so far. I think the data speaks for itself. I think, Femi, you asked about, the question of hydroxychloroquine. That's been answered. We cannot comment on what other presidents are saying. We can only comment on what our own president says. The fourth question was Mr. Eke. You spoke about, you had 3 questions. One on community testing. Now, we're not doing community testing everywhere. In certain states like Lagos, Kano, we're taking the test a lot closer to the community because of the intensity of transmission in those states. So in those states, and even the FCT, some of it was done for specific amounts of time. So in those states, the state is identifying hotspot areas, and based on these identification, intensifying testing in that community. We haven't gotten to the stage of doing community testing across the country. So we're doing it targeting hotspot areas identified by states. The other question was on transmission, hand washing, and fruits. Hand washing is good, whether you're eating fruits or not. So the first thing is, whether you're going to eat a fruit or not, always wash your hands. Fruits have not been identified as specifically mode of transmission of this virus, so we advise you continue treating your fruits as carefully as I hope you have always treated them, washing them with water. But the key thing is washing the hands with which you're touching the fruits. If you do that sufficiently, you'll be fairly safe. You had a third question. Why can we not report the number of tests daily? Sorry about this. We've just started reporting it weekly. It takes an enormous amount of effort to get that daily number of cases out to Nigerians every day. Remember, there's hardly any indicator that is reported right now on a daily basis in Nigeria. Whether it's crime, aviation, education, petroleum products. So to have that SITREP out every single night takes a lot of effort gathering this data because you're collecting data from every state in Nigeria, every lab. So we will get there. The first step is what we've done. We're committed to sharing that data weekly, and as our data systems improve, we work towards sharing it in real time as cases are confirmed. So, thank you.
Thank you. So the first question, I think, has to do with the impact of the lockdown on the informal sector of the economy. And the PTF certainly appreciates the adverse impact that this is having on people's livelihood. But as I keep on saying, we're trying to balance saving lives with saving livelihoods. We are in the process of moving towards further relaxation of the lockdown, but as far as the next 2 weeks are concerned, nothing has changed. We have been given approval by Mr. President to extend those same conditions we had 2 weeks ago for very good reasons. One being that we are not convinced that the time has come in terms of the impact on the pandemic to further relax those restrictions. And as we all know, the level of compliance with some of the guidelines that we have provided has been limited at best in some areas. And we have to make sure that whatever we do in terms of taking actions or decisions, it does not impact, we do not end up dragging ourselves back to the beginning of the pandemic again. But we do appreciate this, and it's one of the things that we will continue to consider as we monitor the next 2 weeks. So the other thing has to do with states and whether we really have harmony across our response. So as I said earlier on, we are encouraging states to come up with their own state-specific initiatives. This pandemic is going to be with us for a little longer, It cannot continue to be driven primarily from the federal level. We have to ensure that state governments start taking ownership. Our responsibility is to provide guidance to the states and make sure that those decisions that we have taken at the federal level are being implemented in one way or the other by the state governments. As we all know, the key responsibility of any government is to ensure the health and well-being of their people. And I'm sure the state governors are doing the same as well. And they're very much aware of these responsibilities. It's also about community engagement. It's also about personal responsibility. When we talk about relaxing the lockdown, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are safer and you can come out and engage in your normal day-to-day activities. Particularly as it relates to vulnerable people and the elderly, you are much safer staying at home. So in as much as we say, yes, we have relaxed for the next so-so number of hours, and the curfew will only be from this time to this time, it doesn't mean that you can go out and do your normal activities without catching COVID. That risk assessment has to be a personal one, and people need to be aware of the risks that they are putting themselves into by engaging in mass gatherings, etc. There was also another question about whether the PTF had a specific guideline regarding mass gatherings, so we'll continue to maintain that we strongly discourage gathering of people beyond 20 unless it's a workplace situation. This is simply because if you have a lot of people gathering in one location, you cannot enforce physical distancing. If we have 50 people in this particular hall, there's no way we can maintain 2-meter distance with each other. And therefore, that's the reason why we are putting these rules in place. And we still haven't reached the stage where we can safely say, let's get rid of this component. And as I keep on saying, it's all about implementing this as a bundle. If you pick and choose, the impact it will have will be much less than delivering all 5 components, whether it's hand washing, sanitization, physical distancing, avoiding mass gatherings, etc. The use of face masks. Those components have to be delivered all at once as a bundle. If you pick and choose, you're further exposing yourself to the risk of catching COVID. The other question has to do with the solidarity trial. I believe WHO might be in a better position to answer this, but at the last set of information I had is we have Lagos, FCT, Ogun, Kaduna, and Sokoto having signed up to participate, and the trial is still at the information gathering stage. And then finally, there was the issue of truck drivers being stopped at state borders and leading to the death of chickens and loss of income. So I think our guidelines are very clear. The restrictions on interstate travel does not apply to essential travel or essential services. And we have specifically excluded agriculture and agric-related activities. Law enforcement, as far as I know, belong to federal authorities, and we expect the guidelines that we have provided and the work we are doing with the security chiefs to be respected by these law enforcement agencies, where people are allowed free movement either because of the type or nature of the work they are doing. They should be allowed free movement across state borders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take the Honorable Minister of Environment now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the PTF, distinguished Senator, ladies and gentlemen and ladies of the press, good afternoon. The question on which areas have we already covered as far as decontamination, disinfection is concerned, and the update on the aviation industry. So far, we have Actually, we are planning on presenting a long list of areas that we have decontaminated tomorrow, but I can give you an update on the ones that we have done so far and ongoing. Currently, as I speak with you, there is a team in the Northwest, right now even working at ABU, Ahmadu Bello University. Over the weekend, they decontaminated and disinfected NDA, Nigerian Defense Academy, and some other places, the courthouses around that area. Again, tomorrow, the teams in South-South and Southeast will commence decontamination and disinfection, particularly one in Edo, and then the other one will start in Anambra. Equally, next week, we will have the team that will start in the Northeast, Adamawa, Gombe, and places like that. And then the same next week, also our team will continue in Lagos. Lagos, we have been doing a lot of decontamination and disinfection because of the situation of Lagos right from the beginning. So Southwest will be continuing, but we'll have a list by tomorrow that will do that. The aviation industry, what's really happening is, I told you earlier that this is an industry that is, different. You have to tread it carefully because of its safety kind of structure. And one of the issues also has to do with the kind of chemicals. The industry really want to sit with us and look at these chemicals that we are using for decontamination, disinfection, as it will affect their equipment, especially aircraft and other equipment. This is very important. So tomorrow we will be sitting with the officials of the aviation industry to do that. Again, we'll keep you updated on that too. On this note, I would like to again call the attention of people about the adhering to the lockdowns. And I'll do it in Hausa just for a minute or two. Jama'a assalamu alaikum. Mana so ne mu ƙara jaddada muku maganan dokan nan ta zaman gida. Tana da muhimmanci kwarai da gaske. Shine ɗaya daga cikin dalilan da yasa wannan cutar ba ta yaɗu fiye da yanda da aka tsammani za ta yaɗu ba, saboda wannan zaman gidan. Wannan tazara da ake samu wajen mu'amala yana rage yanda in mutum na kusa da kai in yayi tari ko yayi atishawa ba za ka iya kama wannan cutar cikin sauƙi ba, domin ga irin yanayin yanda take. Kuma sa wannan takunkumi yana da ƙwarai muhimmanci fiye da yanda ake tsammani. Mun lura mutane da yawa suna sawa, kuma haka ya kamata, muna kuma godiya, amma muna ƙara kira ga waɗanda ba sa sawa su daure su yunƙuri su sa, su kare kansu, su kare wasu. A halin da ake ciki, duk wanda ka gani baka sani ba me yake ciki, shi ma bai san me kake ciki ba, saboda haka ana kallon kallo ne. To mafi ala shine kowa ya zamana ya kare. Wanke hannu da ake magana, a wanke akai-akai. Ko ba komai, ko da ba corona, tsafta wani abu ne shi kanshi da in kama yi za ka ji daɗi. A ci gaba da duk ƙoƙari ana bin waɗannan dokokin. In gwamnati ta ce ka fito ƙarfe kaza ka koma ƙarfe kaza, domin kanka ne. Wanda zai fara cin moriyan rashin kama cutan kai ne, wanda zai fara wahala in ya kama cutan kai ne. To saboda haka ya kamata a yi ƙoƙari a bi, a san cewa an gudu tare, an tsira tare. In Allah ya daba da daɗa wannan cuta, za mu ga bayanta. Assalamu alaikum.
Honorable Minister of State Education.
Well, good evening, everybody. The question relates to seaways as part of a training program for your graduation exercise in a university. My general governance to my fellow students, all of us are still very loyal students, is first of all to be loyal to your lecturer. Follow what the lecturers have said. Follow your teacher. If it is a requirement for you to complete your undergrad studies, please do. However, if you're to participate in a work experience exercise and the place is not open, it's not your fault that it is not open during this COVID period, and you may need to just make those remarks to your lecturer, informing him not that you will not go. Why would you not go when other people are not going? That's not the idea. The idea is that the place may not be available, but if it is available, this period of COVID may not necessarily be excused. So as a general guidance principle for all students, the most important person in your life at the time you are learning is probably your teacher and your lecturer. So you will do well to first of all obey and then make the various remarks that then accompany obeying. But there's also a second part to a question that had been raised here earlier, which the SGF may want to look at. But that question had been answered before, where I explained that almost all our online services have been granted data-free status by all the major networks as part of the collaboration they have already rolled out with us. So if your child or if you go to any of our e-learning platforms, so most of them are already accessible on the free data platform from each of them. They've also gone ahead to, I'm sure, generally reduce data offers within the period as part of what they are offering. But that is available to everybody. It does not matter whether you're education or not. But for their specific data education websites that for which they've already granted free data. So I'm not sure whether the SGF will have further to say on that, but that's their position. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, Foreign Affairs.
PTF, members of PTF, and everybody here present, good evening. There are two questions that were directed at me. The first concerned Nigerian citizens in France who are inquiring whether they could safely board an Air France plane destined for Cotonou, Benin, and with the assumption that they can then cross over into Nigeria. When the question, of course, was asked, I had the benefit of sitting next to the Minister of Interior, who also is responsible for the land border of our country. So, but essentially, the thing is this. We have a protocol in place, and we can only take people according to a number of things. The facilities, for one, that we have available, where they will be quarantined for 2 weeks, and when we have adequate staffing to monitor them for that period of 2 weeks. So that is really the precondition for an approval for anybody to come into the country from outside. You know, as you know, I've reported here in the past that we have taken in almost 100 Nigerians who have come in through the land borders from Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana, in fact. You know, so you know, the possibility is there, but first and foremost, we have to be sure that that we have the requisite capacity to take in those passengers. So the simple answer to them in this particular case, if it is the case that they've already bought tickets and have boarded the flight or are about to board the flight, you know, is that when they get to Cotonou, if it's a fait accompli, we will, as in the past, liaise with our chargé d'affaires in Cotonou and with the two states, depending on the borders that you know, they choose to go through, to see what capacity there might be. And not knowing, again, the numbers that we're talking about, who might have boarded this flight in France to go to Cotonou. and then see how we can process them from Cotonou. But there's certainly no guarantee that they would have immediate access to the country until such a time as they can be absorbed. The second question was that there are 13,000 students in Malaysia under threat of deportation, presumably overstaying their visa. I don't know what the reasons would be for such deportation. But we have not in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs got any such information. Ordinarily, if such a thing were to happen or to be considered, our mission there, we have an embassy there, would have informed us, and we would have engaged with the Malaysian government in respect of that. But the global practice at the moment is that every country knows that there is that the airspace has been closed all around the world, and that there are people, in those countries who, through no fault of their own, might be forced to overstay the duration of their visas. So it's not the practice at the moment for governments to unilaterally embark on issues of deportation, and that's certainly not how such a matter will be dealt with, if indeed that is the case with Malaysia. But I try to call. There are about a number of hours ahead of us, so I think the members of our embassy there are understandably not picking their phones, are probably fast asleep. But we will get in touch with them just to verify if that story is indeed the case. Thank you very much.
Syria.
Good evening. We greet you all once again, and we must forever appreciate the very, very active, inquisitive, and curious Nigerian journalists who we want to get into everything and expose everything. It's good for a democracy, and we thank you for it. Indeed, 15 Chinese nationals came into Nigeria on the 8th of April this year. And from everything we have heard and said, they were here on the bill of CCECC, a Chinese company working in Nigeria, doing some work for us in several places. And in conjunction with some Nigerian companies, agreed to support us in the effort to respond to the pandemic. At IDU, they participated in retrofitting and equipping the isolation center there. They equally worked on the dome project that was handled by the NNPC consortium in conjunction with this day. And the lead company in the NNPC consortium is Sahara Energy. So those are the locations in which they came to work, both in retrofitting the entire facilities, the two facilities, and installing critical, essential, and sensitive medical equipment. They came in, 15 of them came in on the 8th of April. They came on a 30-day visa issued in Beijing. They are still here. And I know I need to tell you why they are here. They are still here, not because they've not completed their job, but because there is a restriction on travels in Nigeria occasioned by the protocol of COVID-19. I think that answers the question. I thank you.
Now we'll take the response from distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar.
The chairman of PTF, who is boss by name but is also the boss, members, honorable ministers, members of PTF, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Well, for clarity, I'm here to observe in an oversight function as a follower from where we came from. But of course, I trust you, press guy, you want to oversight me here too, which is good. And luckily for you, it's a very good question, and you've also directed it to the right person. Because as I've been the vice chair of primary healthcare and communicable diseases, I'm equally the chairman for Senate Rules and Business. So for every bill that gets into the Senate, it comes through my table. I can tell you authoritatively that this Senate is aware of how antiquated mental ill laws are. So as of today, distinguished Senator Ibrahim Yahya Oloriegbe has sponsored a new robust mental ill bill that has passed the first reading, it has passed the second reading, and is referred to the committee for the final, preparation to be passed. Unfortunately, with COVID, we can't have public hearing. But I can assure you, he is the chair of that committee too. So as soon as, we can have public hearing, this law will be passed expeditiously. Trust me. Interestingly, mental ill is equally as important to us in Senate that another distinguished senator, Senator Shetima, also brought another bill on mental health as well. Passed the first reading, that is about to go for the second reading. So be rest assured that mental health concerns will be robustly taken care of by this National Assembly. However, let me say that laws alone will not solve our mental health problem. Mental health is a multidimensional issue, emotional, economic, and superstitions. Some people believe witchcraft is an illness. And the society has a role to play in that. Good governance has a role to play in that. And again, let me say with the permission of the chair that we, the legislature, this night assembly, we've decided we are going to work with the executive. We'll collaborate with them in anything they are doing to serve Nigerian people. We've demonstrated that enough. And I tell you something, even if we don't want to do that, there's a new sheriff in town now. It's called Oga Corona, isn't it? COVID-19. In fact, even stubborn husbands have been made to behave now with their wives and family. So you are be rest assured that anything that has to be done to support this team, we've discussed that and we've agreed. Key things we've identified is that we have to do more testing. All resources that is required, we're going to support and provide. We need to communicate more to our people, explain to our people more. People have to take more responsibility. We need to coordinate more with the state governments. We need to do all of this. But there's something that came out very, very importantly in our meeting today, is that we need to be more aggressive. We need to be more courageous in dealing with COVID-19, because this virus is here and it's going to be around for a long time to come. I assure you that. We can't continue to run away. We have to take courageous decisions. However, we will not take decisions stupidly without considering science and data. And as scanty as data is so far, what is available is good enough for our scientists, and we have a lot of them working with this team, to play around with the data and tell us what's going on. We know what the morbidity and the mortality is saying so far. We need to open this country, but slowly, carefully, and scientifically. And we'll do that so that the damage that COVID is causing economically, nobody can quantify it, given the mortality and the morbidity we are experiencing in Nigeria. Now, let me say something lastly. which is that there are key things you guys in the press must carry to our people. We have to take responsibility. Even if the government opens, enforcement can best be carried out by taking responsibility. Citizens, we wash our hands, we social distance, we wear face masks. This is a life we have to live with for a long time to come. But I tell us something, I expect a cultural revolution. COVID-19 should bring that to us, which is, for example, we say social distancing. We love parties, wedding ceremony, and this costs us billions of naira. Please, let's stop this for some time and reinvest that money in education and health. Well, those who are rich and powerful already have enough money for their education and health. Please reinvest that for the masses and help those who need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished Senator. I now call on the chairman of the PTF on COVID-19, the SGF.
I think today is my best day. I just have one question to answer. Today is my best day because my colleagues have taken off all the burden and answered all the questions. I just have to answer the question that deals with the Madagascar consignment. We have repeatedly said here that we did not ask for it. It was given by the government of Madagascar to African countries as their contribution to wanting to find solution to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have repeatedly said our consignment, those of West African countries, were dropped off Guinea-Bissau, and that we were making arrangements to go and airlift it. As God will have it, the president of Guinea-Bissau decided to visit our president last Saturday. So when he was coming, he came with our consignment of 5 cartons, and those 5 cartons were delivered to me yesterday in the evening, sealed, not a bottle out of it. I'm going to engage the Minister of Health, who has responsibility of validation through his institutions that are chartered by law to do that. And the president was off front with that even when he took delivery of it from the president of Guinea-Bissau. He said it quite clearly that what we were going to do with the consignment will be guided by science. After the processes of validation, we will now know where to go. In terms of the question of whether it comes with a cost, well, it was handed to me without an invoice. So I assume it doesn't come with any cost. That's my assumption. For that, I think the Madagascar issue and the Chinese issue should be laid to rest. Because both these two issues are not central to the problem that we have at hand now. They're not central. So we should try as much as possible to minimize the judicious use of our time to deal with important issues. I believe you would support us in this cause, that these two issues should be laid to rest. And there shouldn't be any further interrogation or use of our precious moments and times or matters that will not help our country fight COVID-19. I would close and thank you specifically for what you've been doing for this nation by ensuring that you show up every day in spite of the challenges that you have, even turning up in the places of your work. But that is the call of duty and the sign of responsibility on the part of each and every one of you. And I would want to give you this assurance that the nation owes you a great deal of gratitude for what you've been doing. You are exposing yourself even in the line of duty by showing up every day. Some of you stay probably out of the city environment, but you have to make sure that you turn up at every given time to do your bit in gathering information that will be helpful to our people and sharing it out there. And I want to thank distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar for what he has said today. Life after COVID-19 will not be our normal type of life again. COVID-19 has come and it has disrupted everything you know as normal. And the benefit of that disruption is that we will begin to put on our thinking caps and begin to address issues differently, because it has exposed the weaknesses in all systems. It's not only the Nigerian health system that has been exposed. Even the big countries with very strong economies, COVID-19 has exposed every gap in their system. The system of health, their social safety nets, their governance issues have all been disrupted. And I can assure you that after COVID-19, at an individual level, at a community level, at the state level, at the national level, we will begin to do things differently. It cannot be business as usual again. If we do not learn anything from COVID-19 and build institutions that will be enduring and sustainable, we would have failed the next generation. I want to thank you and have a good evening. Which one? Of what? Oh, those that are involved in it? Well, I think he did. Dr. Sani answered that. Yeah. Well, I don't know the states, but I think Dr. Sani can come up the stage and answer that. Oh, okay. He will give you the information at the close of the conference. Thank you. Tomorrow, I think we have FEC tomorrow. We have visual FEC tomorrow, because you can see that even government activities is taking a new dimension. So we can't guarantee that we'll be available for the briefing tomorrow, but we rest assured, be assured that we will see you on Thursday. For tomorrow, we have virtual FEC. We don't know when to finish, and we don't want to keep you waiting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SGF. Once again, we must say a very big thank you to our partners and to Nigerians watching us from home and from their various offices. Before we close today, we want to bring you this message, and that's that the virus will not disappear anytime soon. We are in for a long haul. We urge businesses, offices, professional bodies, places of worship, educational institutions, and what have you, either already opened or awaiting reopening, to plan and adopt new strategies under a COVID-19 era. Above all, behavioral change is a must for every citizen, because COVID-19 has changed the world completely. God bless Nigeria. We thank you very much. We hope to see you on Thursday for the next briefing. Thank you.